And I've just gone ahead and loaded in our subsurface scattering example, SSS example. And this is located in the content folder, and you can load this in. And this will be a good way to show our subsurface scattering because we have an object that has a hole in the back of it where we can see through into the object, and also lots of bumps and different protruding areas to really show how our light will be scattering through this object. Because doing this with just a simple object, it's going to be really difficult to tell exactly what it is that's going on. So let's go into our material options for this. And for our color and alpha tab, we can see we just have a solid color, it's basically a gray. So we're just going to load in a different color map. And we can load in a red and take a look, and actually that's going to be a little difficult to tell. So I'm going to edit this color map and edit our color to give us something that's a bit orange, because orange will be a really good way to tell exactly where things are showing up. And I'm just going to go over to our highlight tab and just give us a little bit of a highlight that's shiny. Change our highlight color, and let's turn that to a white, and now we can just see that little bit of a highlight showing up, and we can see that on the different areas of our model. And you can adjust the light setting and the sun to fit wherever it is that you need it. If we go up to the atmosphere editor, position of sun, we can change the azimuth and move that throughout our surface. So let's go about right there. We have 233. Of course, it really depends on your specific scene. Let's go back into our material editor. And we can take a look at our Translucency tab now. What we want to do is enable subsurface scattering. And let's just take a look right away at our material preview. And we can really see how our light is refracting all within of our surface, and we can really start to see through it. And it definitely starts to immediately get the appearance that it is somewhat translucent. So we have a lot of different options for this. Under our first section, we have just our overall translucency. This gives us the ability to adjust the overall amount of subsurface scattering by depth. So how far do we want the rays to penetrate into our object? Right now, we have a slider for short and deep, and as we move our slider along, you can see we're starting at this area about 5 centimeters, and we can increase that up into the meters. And the higher the value, the more translucent the apparent material is going to be. You can see we can shorten that, and we start to see a lot less dispersion or scattering. We could pull that back a little bit more, and now we see just a little bit along the surface. And all this is really going to be relative to the actual size of the object that you're editing. If we take a look at our balance, the default for this is set to 50%. And this allows us to adjust between the absorption and multiple scattering. And this is all within our surface. And we can get a lot of different effects by just changing these settings. We can bring this up to 80%, and now we can see it's a lot darker, and we don't have as much scattering. Bring that up a little bit higher, and we notice less and less of an effect. We start to bring that into the other direction, we notice sort of the opposite happening, where now we have a very strong glow in the inside of our object. And I'm just going to bring that up and reset that to a default of 50%. So it really depends on the appearance that you're looking for. and just adjusting the balance is a really neat way to do that. Now our next option is our Refraction Index. And once we start working with subsurface scattering, under our transparency, our Refraction Index is going to be grayed out. And that's because this is all controlled now by our translucency. So whatever settings we need to have for our material, for our Refraction Index, we need to make sure we set them in our Translucency tab, because we can't do it in the Transparency anymore. So by adjusting our Refraction Index, basically as we did with any sort of transparency, we can raise up the overall scattering and the bouncing of light based on that index. So if we start to bring it in a backwards amount, we'll start to see a rim go all the way around our surface. And we can do that, so just a small little rim that comes around. But overall, we wouldn't really want to have too many values below 1. And we'd basically want to go in the other direction. So we'd want to adjust our Refraction Index between 1 and 2. And depending on what you're working on, sometimes maybe a little bit higher. Our next setting, underneath our Translucency section, is just our overall effects quality, which basically changes our render times, but also the appearance of our object. So if we want our effect to be extremely realistic and look really good, no grain, no artifacts, then we're going to want to increase this quality boost to better. But once we do that, it does take a lot longer to render. And if we move this to our faster setting, we get a very quickly calculated surface where it renders very quickly as compared to the other settings, but we do see a lot of artifacts, and overall the calculation isn't very accurate, and it's not going to look very good. So you want to at least have the setting of none for our quality boost, and then if you need to, you can go above that to get a much better looking render. And we can just increase that up to 1, and now we can see a lot of those artifacts have already disappeared. Our next option is absorption, and we can either turn that on or off. Basically, turning that off is going to remove the overall translucency effect, and you really want to have that on, otherwise you're not really going to see the subsurface scattering. We have the ability to adjust this backwards and forwards, which is basically which way is our light moving once it penetrates the object. Is it going forward or is it coming backward? And we can adjust these settings just by moving it either forward, so now we can have the rays scattering more forward, or we can also bring that back and have them scattering backward. And this is very similar to other different types of programs and other 3D applications where you have both forward and backward subsurface scattering. And we can just set that back to a value of 0, which is our default, which in this case seems to be working the best. Now underneath that we have a filter color that is also in direct relation to that. So in other words, the light on the inside, basically what is our light picking up as it enters through the object. And we want to edit this color to basically be the color of our object. So I'm going to move that to more of an orangish color and click OK. And now we can also see that color show up a lot more on the inside because we're penetrating the inside of the surface and really picking up on that orange color, and that's just all getting scattered around in the inside. And we can move around and take a look with different lighting and just see our object, how it shows up. We'll move that back around. We can also adjust the scattering color by turning on multiple scattering. If I turn that off, we can see what the object's going to look like without that on. Turn that on, we can see what it looks like with that current gray color. But we can also change this to any color. So I'm just going to go to Edit Color, And we're going to select something green and click OK. And we'll let that refresh. And we're not really seeing a whole lot of an effect of this specific color. So let's just go ahead and change that color to something else that won't blend together too well with our orange. We'll just select a purple and click OK. And now we can see more of a purple hint inside the surface of our object. We could change that to something else, maybe make it a little bit darker. We could turn that into a blue. And now we just see that little bit of a blue on the inside. And if I shorten our depth, you can see the effect. If I increase that, we see a lot more of the outer color and the current orange. We could shorten that up even more. And now we really only see the outsides. And bring that back to the center, or around our center. And we're going to take a look at the last option, which is use infinitely thin surface model. If I check this on, we take a look, we can see we have sort of a cell shading effect, where it's either one color or the other. And once we get into the shadows, you can really see it just sort of splits off, and there's really not a whole lot of scattering that's going on in there. But of course, if that's the effect you're trying to achieve, then that option is there for you. So I'm going to just go ahead and turn that off. And we can go back and take a look at that. Now, if we take a look at this model, we can see that there is sort of a hole in the back here. And what I'm going to do is just place a point light inside that hole. And that way we can see this light traveling through our surface. So we just want to place that on the inside. And we can see already from this angle how much it's scattering within our surface and around it. If we take a look at it from another angle where we actually can't see the light, and we just want to be able to look through our surface and see that overall glow. So in this case, we'll need to adjust our settings. We'll go back into the surface editor for our example object. And we can make that a little bit deeper. And once we do that, we start to see that light on the inside because we're adjusting the depth of how far our light travels. And before, with our lower setting, the light was getting cut out before it was able to reach the surface. So now we can see that hole with the light and all of our scattering rays on the inside. And the deeper we make that, the more we're going to see that light. We could also adjust more forward. And now we can really see that glow in that specific area. Maybe turn down our depth a little. And we can just see it in that small amount. So subsurface scattering is a great way to create a lot of different types of materials, like wax and marble, and basically anything that has any sort of translucency to it. Certain types of gems we can use to recreate the overall realism. And it's quite easy to just get a hang of these different settings. And of course it is different for every object because you have different scales, so you're going to really have to play around with it for it to look the best. But overall the settings are really quite easy to use, and getting an understanding of them is just really easy. Plus another thing you can do is actually just load in some of the surfaces that have already been created. And what we could do is just load in, and there's a subsurface scattering section where we can see some of these different materials that have subsurface scattering, and that way you can kind of dissect it and take a look. We'll go ahead and load in this ruby. And we can take a look at that. And we can see we have a really neat looking object, really neat surface. And we can see that our average depth on this specific one is set very short. What I could do is increase the depth of that, and we'll see a lot more scattering. We can notice that around the edges. Increase that a little bit more. And now we see a lot more of the surface on the inside. And we end up with a very realistic, very cool looking material. Now the last tab we want to take a look at in the Advanced Material Editor is the effects. So let's just load in a sphere into our blank scene. I'm going to double click on this sphere to open up our Advanced Material Editor. We're going to click on the Effects tab. And we can see there's a bunch of different options in here for a variety of different effects. Our first one we can see under the lighting section is our diffusion. And this is going to adjust the overall brightness of our object and how much it's diffused. You can see with a higher diffusion setting, we have much brighter areas that are in the sun and in our light, and then the darker areas are of course a lot darker. If we lower our diffusion, we're going to end up with a very dark surface because our light is not being diffused as much. By default, most of these are set to about 60%, but if you ever need to make anything just a little bit brighter, you can easily just adjust your diffusion and make it just a little bit higher. We're going to bring that down back to 60. And our next setting is ambient, which is currently set to 40%. If I bring this all the way down to 0, we're going to notice a lot less ambient light. And this has to do with basically our faked radiosity light. If I increase this ambient amount up to 100%, we're going to see we have a lot of ambient light affecting our overall material. So that really depends on how crisp you want your object to be and how defined by the lightness and the shadows. And you can easily just adjust that ambient value to get more of an even look or something that has extremely harsh shadows. Our next setting is the Luminous Setting, which will allow us to make our object bright and give the appearance that it is glowing. You can see at the very high value, almost the entire surface is all white. And if you're using any of the higher lighting models like radiosity, with higher luminous settings, you're going to see a lot of reflection around other objects because of this very bright light. So you'll be able to light up specific areas and just create an effect of almost like a light bulb. So you can adjust that overall luminous setting and bring it all the way down to 0 if needed. Our next option is our contrast. I'm just going to turn this all the way up to hard right now. If we take a look, we can see that effect that it has created, and that's basically where our diffusion line before was very dispersed and of course softer. We now have a very hard line. So if you were going to create something like a planet, this would be the setting you would want to use to increase the contrast so it looks more realistic. Because when you're working with a very large scale, you're going to have a very sharp cutoff for your diffusion. Smaller objects are exposed to a lot more surrounding light, and you would see more of a blend, as we can see right now. And we can just adjust these settings very easily. We can just bring it down to soft, and now we notice a very, very large gradient between our diffusion values. And we can just bring that up a little bit higher. Our next setting is color reflected light, and then it has in parentheses metallic. And what this will allow us to do is retain the color of our object when we're reflecting other things around it. So let's go into our color and just change the color map on our object right now. We're going to select the bright blue. We can take a look. We have a blue object now. We're going to go to Reflections and increase our global reflection. Bring that up to 100%. We have complete reflection, where the color of our object has pretty much been entirely removed. But if we go to that color reflected light and we increase that, then we start to see the color of our object with the reflection. So we can increase that value to see how much color we're seeing, but also we're still seeing that full reflection. So it's a really neat option that we have, and we can of course connect that to a specific function if needed, if you want to have a little bit of variance. We'll just set that all the way down to 0. I'm going to turn our reflections down to 0. We're going to take a look at the next option, which is color transmitted light. And this works for transparent objects. So we're going to increase our transparency. And if we take a look in the scene, what we really want to be looking at is the ground. And currently right now the ground pretty much just looks gray. Just a darker variation of that ground, and we don't have any of the actual light from our transparent object going through. But if we increase our color transmitted light, now we can see the shadow is actually based on the color of the object. And this is great for working with specific types of colored glass and anything that's transparent that has color that you want that color to show through onto other objects. So we can adjust overall value of that. And you can get some really neat effects when you're working with caustics in this manner. Our next setting is the backlight. And now this is for one-sided objects, basically leaves and planes. So right now it's currently grayed out since we're working with a sphere. So we're going to come back to that, and let's just move on to our other options. I'm going to go back to our transparency and just turn that off, and then go back to our effects. And we're going to jump down here to glowing material really quick, and we can just turn that on. And what this gives us the ability to do is just give the appearance that our object is glowing. And we can adjust the intensity and the radius of our glow. And we can see a nice preview within the actual preview of our material. And we can also take a look at our preview render. And although we don't see it right away, once it is finished rendering, it then applies that glow effect. So as we increase our radius, we can see a much larger glow. And then our intensity will have a much more intense glow. And we also have an option whether or not we'd like to glow behind objects. And basically this is for if we have an object in front of our current glowing object, and whether or not we'd like that glow to affect the object in front of it, or if we don't want it to. So we can just turn that on or off. Another way we can increase our overall glow effect is by adjusting our luminous setting. So if we increase that, and we let that render, we can see a much brighter glow around our object. And typically something that's going to be glowing, you would want to have a little bit of luminous setting to it. We can turn that up really high, let that render, and now we can see an extremely bright glow around our object. So I'm going to turn those settings down, turn off our glowing material. And now if we go back above our glowing material, we can see we have an origin of material. And this allows us just to adjust the overall origin of the entire material, as opposed to the origins that we have set for specific color maps or bump maps. And this way we can still change that origin without having to go through every single option to move exactly where the starting position is. Now right now, because I have just a blank object and there's really not a defined material on it, we're not going to be able to see that sort of an effect. But if you remember back to editing other origins, it will work exactly the same way. Our next option underneath that is velocity of material origin, which allows us to animate our specific material. And with the X, Y, and Z settings, we're basically just telling View how much we would like to move along those specific settings and how quickly. And now if you're already working with an animated surface where you have a fractal node that is animated, then these settings are going to be automatically created. But if you don't have the ability to animate your fractals or any of the functions, then you can use this setting to manually select your overall animation. And our last set of options are our global transformation. We have the ability to add turbulence, rotation, and cycling. Take a look at turbulence, click Edit. We can adjust the complexity of our overall turbulence from a value of 1 to 5. We can also set up our noise, and now we can choose from all of, or at least a large amount of the noise that's available within the function editor. And that way we can add just that extra little bit of turbulence to affect our material. And then we can change our combination modes. You can see we have a couple of different ones there. And then the overall turbulence effect, the scale, the amplitude, and the harmonics. And that's all pretty straightforward. Once you start editing those settings, you'll really see them. Same thing with rotation. We have the ability to rotate this object on all of our different axes, along with twisting them on specific axes. And if we take a look at our cycling, you can see we have the ability to adjust the amount and the scale. And these are just really nice for giving you a nice overall setting for everything, where you can adjust and affect the entire material and everything without actually having to go into specific functions and use these specific settings within actual fractal nodes and noise nodes.